book is called The Defector. But a quick word first, Richard, on your last effort, the book about Five Eyes, which you were here to talk to us about. Particularly, I mean, what's changed in that world since we last saw you?
I mean, Trump has returned. That's what's changed in that world. And of course, his return has brought about a great deal of changes within the intelligence community, particularly in the US. So you've got now a system that is far more politically driven and politically directed. You've got department heads. So traditionally in the US, you have agency heads who are appointed by the president. Now you've got departmental heads. You've got dissent being rooted out of the agencies. Anyone who's not aligned politically is being kicked out. I've got a lot of friends of mine who were formerly serving and who are currently serving, who are sort of giving me sort of a pretty fascinating and frightening picture of how it is inside the agencies.
How do you prove loyalty? Do you know? Is that a silly question?
I think, well, how do you prove loyalty? Yeah. By essentially conducting yourself according to the political agenda of the day.
Not according to the code that you signed up to when you became an intelligence officer.
No, because of course you've got many people within the intelligence agencies, whether we're talking about the CIA or the FBI, the sort of the flagships, who are all about independence, are all about impartiality, are all about conducting themselves according to the laws of the land. Yeah, that's exactly right. So essentially, if you can't have dissent, which is what you need within intelligence, then you end up with false intelligence, which is what we had in the lead up to Iraq. And as soon as you have intelligence that is either fabricated or politically motivated, then you can see what happens.
I'm really struggling with the challenge of properly chronicling the scale of what is going on the other side of the Atlantic, because it is so constant and it is so unrelenting. And you can't do it all day, every day. And so whether you're talking about people being snatched from the streets by masked men in the employ of the government, or whether you're talking about senior and highly respected intelligence professionals feeling that they have no place in the agencies anymore because they are not going to do Donald Trump's bidding. They're going to act in the interests of the American people and the American country. How shocked are you? I mean, how do you have these moments as well where you go...
I have these moments almost every day. I speak to people about this. I researched this area. I researched Five Eyes, which is the spy network that was created after the end of the Second World War and brought on board the US, UK, Canada, New Zealand and Australia. And the whole point of the Five Eyes creation to begin with was to combat the Soviet threat. So if you were to fast forward now from the post-World War II to now, well, it repurposed itself as an alliance. And despite that, the threat from Russia remained constant, and the interpretation of that threat was consistent across the whole board within the alliance. But only now, in the Trump's second term, is there a difference in opinion about whether or not Russia constitutes a threat. And that's fascinating because that's never happened. Yeah. It's one thing to disagree on policy matters, another thing to disagree on how to approach the Russian threat. We've never been in a place where there's a disagreement between the US and the rest of the Five Eyes about whether or not Russia is a threat. And I think that's largely because we've moved from a relational setup that existed ever since the Second World War to a transactional setup, because Trump is about making deals rather than putting sort of morality first or independence and partiality.
I wonder whether, when you sat down to start writing The Defector, which was presumably a few years ago, that the present seemed less interesting than the past, and now we arrive at the publication of the book, and the present is at least
totally. Yeah, he's made my job so much easier. In fact, the last part of the book, the epilogue, I sort of move into the Putin era, and the reason being is because Oleg Lyalin's defection led to the forced shutdown of Department V, which is a sabotage and assassinations department within the KGB. And that program, the assassinations and sabotage program, was not revived until Putin came back into power in the late 1990s. So I sort of chart his rise to power and then his time. And of course, the first targets they went after were defectors, and the first known targets they went after were Alexander Litvinenko in 2006, who was killed with polonium-210 poisoning, and they went after Sergei Skripal in 2018, and then Alexander Poteyev in 2020, the mission sort of continues for them.
History repeating.
Yeah. So
I don't know why it bothers me so much, but I always make a point of mentioning Dawn Sturgis at this point when the Skripal.
Completely. In fact, I mention her as well because although the attack against Skripal and his daughter wasn't a success by their idea of success, it certainly led to the tragic death of Dawn Sturgis.
So who was Oleg Lyalin, and why are you only telling his story now?
Well, I tell you what, I'm telling his story now because in the last few years, the US declassified material relating to his case. So his case is still sealed by MI5. But I managed to get information through incidental declassifications from the JFK files, CIA and FBI files, and I was able to sort of paint this fascinating picture of this individual who was really misplaced. He should not have been a KGB officer to begin with. He was a party man, he's a boozer, loved to go out and have
poppers and booze, not as in the communists.
Yeah, exactly. He wasn't. So he was talented enough to make the Department V program, the sabotage and assassinations program, but as soon as he was deployed to Britain in 1969, he kind of fell into the party scene and would go out and he had multiple love affairs. He was married with a child, but he had about 5 girlfriends on the go. And his life became so chaotic that in early 1971, he approached MI5 through Hampstead Police Station and said, "Can you kick me out of the country?" And MI5 said, "Why?" He said, "Because I want to go back to divorce my wife and be with my girlfriend." And immediately they thought, this guy's either insane or something's not right about him. Maybe he's been sent by the KGB. So when they ran a mission against him, surveillance mission, to try to corroborate all of the intelligence he was providing. And the intelligence he was providing was quite shocking. He told him that the KGB was plotting to kill politicians. It was plotting to attack Britain's seawater with radioactive waste, plotting to go after British medical and military and economic targets, and also exposed all of the KGB operatives who were running undercover in the UK.
Now, what time is it? 12:40. It should probably build up a little bit of tension. How many Soviet officials were expelled from Britain? Did MI5 manage to purge from Britain as a consequence of his information? How many people would guess that correctly?
105.
Yeah, that's 105. Just incredible, isn't it?
It's insane. I mean, if you look at the expulsions that took place after the Skripal case in 2018, well, in total, there were about 156 from memory, and that's from more than 30 countries.
Yeah.
So by a single country, that is massive. They basically, and also they had a second order. So Britain then came out, Alec Douglas Hume came out and said, if you retaliate aggressively, we're going to go after more people. Yeah. There were up to about 200 KGB officers operating undercover in Britain, more per capita than in any other Western nation, including the United States.
It's extraordinary. And so were some of the plans that he shared that you've just alluded to. I know that people who write about espionage and the intelligence agencies probably expect the words James Bond to appear at some point in every conversation that they ever have. But you're talking about contaminating seawater, destroying railway systems, sabotaging emergency food supplies, getting radioactive waste into the waters, all that kind of thing. Remind us why this was of such value to MI5, because the subtitle of the book, The Defector, is the man who saved MI5. It was on its knees in the early 70s.
Completely. So the 1960s, of course, you had MI5 struggling to deal with the defections to the other side. So we had Burgess and McLean in 1950, 10 years on, or 14 years on, 13 years on. You had Philby who defected, but also there was there was a great deal of insecurity about how to deal with the Soviet threat. And I think it was completely misrepresented in their head. It was exaggerated. And that was largely because of the information that MI5 was getting from the CIA. And that information was completely flawed because the CIA was convinced that there was a deception program that had been created by the KGB called the Master Plan, and that was in place to train people on how to become defectors. So, of course, anyone who was approaching the West as a defector was considered to be a suspect.
It's a double agent.
As a double, completely. So, but in addition to that, the CIA convinced MI5 that Harold Wilson was a spy, convinced MI5 that the Roger Hollis was a spy, the head of MI5, and the deputy head of MI5, Graham Mitchell, was a spy as well. Now, thankfully, MI5 ran a series of investigations to all those claims and discredited those claims by 1971. So when Oleg Lyalin approached MI5, they thought, what if we withhold information from our buddies at the CIA, because they're quite they're quite flimsy with their insights. And so they did. And that was the first time during the Cold War that Britain took that step to withhold information in the interest of national security instead of furthering its closeness, within the special relationship.
Just extraordinary.
And so now fast forward 54 years, and I think something like that is very likely to be happening, because we know for certain that, for instance, intelligence exchanges on counterterrorism are happening. If there's a counterterrorism threat, you would provide the information to the US and vice versa. But on threats relating to Russia, I believe, and I understand based on conversations that I've had, that there is withholding of information. Now, you could say that withholding is legitimate because within the Five Eyes you have a categorization that allows for the withholding of intelligence. But I think we're potentially going to see more and more of it because of the contaminated thinking in the US at the moment about the Russian
threat.
I like
that phrase, contaminated thinking, and nothing's off the table. I mean, to be simplistic about things, if Donald Trump became party to information, many people would consider it feasible that he'd just tell Vladimir Putin.
Or just put it up online. Exactly, which is why the big joke right now within the Five Eyes is that they should change the name from Five Eyes to Six Eyes, because the Russians are probably going to have a lot of the information.
How funny. Because you just thought Four Eyes, actually, to get America out of the room, but that's not ever going to happen.
Well, the Americans have got so much power and status and reach. I mean, the US intelligence budget alone is about $100 billion plus, which is about 20 times the size of the British intelligence budget, which is about 500 times the size of the New Zealand budget. So there's a complete imbalance in the power structures.